Welcome back to Eye on South Asia. Prakash, we're going to talk about India-US relations. Now, there was a conference that was held by one of the neoconservative foundations. It's like a think tank. And Walter Lohman, the director of Asian Studies Center Heritage Foundation, was at this conference, and it was titled, "Is the U.S.-India relationship oversold?" An oversold question mark is the big headline title here. So he's implying that this strategic relationship between U.S. and India had so many hopes on it, and everyone was writing so much about it, talking a lot about the potentials, what could come of it. And he says that really it served India's interests, and he's talking about India's development, economic, nuclear, global, in all sectors. India's the one that's been gaining in this relationship, and he's really asking, when is India going to give back? And specifically, he's talking about things like ratifying the CSC, and also India's US-India nuclear deal being in a slowdown. And of course, we also have the issue of the taxation of foreign investors in India. Related to that, the retail corporations coming into India having trouble establishing themselves. And a very central argument that Lohman had was India seems to be very mum on this issue with Iran. So with all these things, he's saying we had so much expectations on this relationship, where's it going? And India seems to be taking and taking, and he had some very strong words to say on this issue. He says, you know, we can't be taking these several trips until India meets its obligations under current agreements. And he says, how can we move forward on new commitments when we haven't met our current ones? And like I was mentioning, India's nuclear relationship with Iran, that's kind of his main point.
No, I don't agree with that completely, though I read the article. I'm aware of what's going on in the political front, in the economic front. Let's not confuse between the two. A country's relationship with a foreign country is based on several factors, several facets. One is political, one is economic. We look at the economic picture. India certainly has invested a lot of money. To give one example, India placed an order for the purchase of Boeing 737 from Boeing Corporation in Seattle worth $12 billion. Mm-hmm. It's the highest purchase ever made by a foreign country in a Boeing. I can go on and give you hundreds of examples. That's not the case.
Yes.
Politically, well, there may be some drawbacks because India cannot always toe the line of the US. If you see in the United Nations, US views are different from India's views. Mm-hmm. And when I asked the ambassador or the diplomats, they were saying, well, because India and US are coming closer, it's not that we have to see eye to eye on every issue, because India has got its own foreign policy, which is time and tested for 63 years. So we can't just like that change. But obviously, when the question of, like international terrorism or war on terror or, something like India and US are coming together. Mm-hmm. But again, if you see again Sri Lanka in Geneva, US sponsored resolution, India voted against it. Everybody thought India would support the US resolution against Sri Lanka, but it voted against it. So what I'm trying to say is politically, whatever India is doing, it's political stand. Mm-hmm. But economically, I would say US is also benefited because the IT companies, for example, Infosys, has set a huge facility in US. They're employing about 30,000 people, out of which at least 25,000 will be locals.
Right, they're not just Indians.
They're not just Indian.
Right.
No. So they're investing billions of dollars in infrastructure. Whether it's manufacturing or service-oriented, India is investing in the US. And India has got money to invest in US, get jobs, hook up the economy, and do a lot of good for the society. So I wouldn't for a minute saying, oh, India is getting all the benefits,
Right.
US is not getting. Maybe the proportions may change, 60-40 or 30-70, or that's fine. But in trade, there's always been an imbalance in a trade. There is nothing like a perfect trade in the world. There's no 50-50 trade. There's always an imbalance. Which country gets less depends on what the other country wants from it.
Yes. And he's also said things like, he thought it was crazy to support India's permanent seat at the UN Security Council because he says that in 2010, India has voted against the US 44 times out of 71. But like you're saying, India has its own autonomy.
Yeah.
And it's a country of over 1 billion people. They have to take care of themselves. And do you think that the fact that this is a conservative based meeting, does that have something to do with this viewpoint? That it's more aggressive?
But generally, during the Bush administration, India and US hit it off very well. That's why they signed the civil nuclear deal, and the countries are going in a good direction. In democratic setup, the democratic dispensation, there always been talks about cutting down on H-1Bs and immigration problem and not allowing IT companies. So there's been kind of mistrust between India and US in the past 3 years of the democratic regime. Mm-hmm. So every regime changes. There's bound to be a policy change. So I'll probably attribute not the blame completely on India, but to a larger extent, the dispensation in Washington changed, and it changed his attitude towards India. Probably that could be the reason. We don't know. But on a good governmental level, in fact, I was in Washington recently. I met with a lot of congressmen and administrators. The US values India's friendship. They're not going to just drop them like a hot potato.
Right.
But there may be some issues, but it's bound to happen.
Yes.
Between any two countries, particularly democratic countries, there are always, don't you think there's differences between United States and Israel?
Right.
Don't you think there's a problem between US and Pakistan?
Of course.
It's bound to happen.
Right. And in this conference, there's not necessarily any solutions that are being given. It's just really just a thought that's put out there, maybe some complaints.
It's just a laundry list of complaints against India.
And he's not even suggesting more pressure put on India. He's just getting these thoughts out there. So, I don't know. It just seems like a lot of
personally, see, there are a lot of think tanks in Washington. Some think tanks really contribute to the growth and development of ties between democratic countries and the work for the development of good relations between India and US. Maybe some think tanks take a different view. It all depends upon who is doing it, what is doing it, and how much of publicity they get out of the mileage. That's the key question.
Right. And meanwhile, corporate America does not believe that US-India relationship is completely oversold, but they do kind of believe, well, according to Diane Farrell, the Executive Vice President and Senior Director of Policy Advocacy of the US-India Business Council, she has said that it has been somewhat overhyped. And she cites this instance of the taxation, the increased retrospective action with several companies, like we were talking about last time, Vodafone was one of them, that are taking a hit when it comes to investing in India. So she's saying, the best bright spot that you can talk about right now is trade, and she wants to make sure that it's kind of more equalized and there can be less taxation. So she's talking on that front.
Yeah, we're going to have a new president for the US-India Business Council. Mr. Ajay Banga, chairman, is the president CEO of the MasterCard. So these are the kind of people who are going to take the relationship between the two countries to a different level. And people like Ajay Banga at the helm of affairs, we hope that the Indo-EU relationship will reach new heights.
Right. And meanwhile, we had the visit of President Zardari, the Pakistani president, to India. Was it last week that he visited? Or
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. And this was actually facilitated by the U.S., and the U.S. seems to be happy with this meeting. And essentially what it is trying to speed up the peace process between India and Pakistan. So, this is basically pushing the two countries more towards normalization with each other. How do you see the U.S. playing a role in this?
This is more dubbed as religious diplomacy, because the Pakistan president came to visit the famous Dargah, Sir Ahmad Chishti in Ajmer, which is visited by not only Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, everybody goes there because that's a Sufi saint, a kind of a monument for a Sufi saint in Ajmer. So the Pakistan president wanted to take a pilgrimage to India. He came there to Ajmer, he got the blessings, and good thing, he said, he took a vow in the Dargah that he will work for the peace between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
This is something which is very rare for a country which has been fought 3 wars with India to declare that these two countries are going to be together. And I'm telling this in front of the most revered saint who is in India, been revered in Pakistan. So it's a good development. In fact, India and Pakistan are not looking at with suspicions anymore. In fact, India has given them the most favored nation status because India could get anything from Pakistan across the border. Similarly, Pakistan could get rice, vegetables, everything from India. And after all, they were living together 65 years ago.
Right.
They were not strangers. So I think I wouldn't say this is a US inspired visit by Pakistani President of India, rather than the genuine feeling of the Pakistan government to shake hands with India, be friendly, because they're not going to lose anything by being friendly with India.
Right. And the trade being freed up between the two countries is something that's been going on for the past couple of months, and that's been facilitated by both countries.
Absolutely.
Especially by India. Like, India wanted to kind of push this trade happening so that they could speed up the peace process.
Yeah, because there's no point in blaming Pakistan for every terrorist activity.
Right.
Because Pakistan itself has been a victim of terror.
Exactly.
I mean, though there may be some players involved in the game, but largely the administration has been very, sympathetic towards, except after that Mumbai incident, nothing happened in India. So we hope and believe that the Pakistan government will really genuinely wants friendship with India, and India similarly wants to be friends with Pakistan, and we hope that this friendship blossoms into a good understanding.
Right. Okay, so we are going to take another short break, and we'll be right back on Eye on South Asia.